Hello everyone, Richard here at Calvin Wazoo, and I am doing something really different. And this is not necessarily going to become a regular thing, but I was reading the book I am currently reading, and I was really struck by this chapter. They're all very short chapters, and I want to read it to you. And I'm not going to have any comment about it. But I do find this chapter to be extraordinarily insightful to the human condition for many, many people. It is from the book by Leo Tolstoy, Resurrection, which is, not among his more well-known books. However, and I think it was like one of his last ones that he wrote. It was copyrighted or published in 1899. So that's the period that we're talking about. I'm going to read this one chapter. It is chapter 23 from book 2. And forgive me if I mispronounce some of the names in here. But the chapter is about the protagonist, Naludov, making some observations about a former friend and colleague and classmate, and how that person has changed. And as I said, if you don't want to, I'm not talking about music in this video. And I know that's what a lot of you folks subscribe to me for, is because of the music that I talk about and share. So, hey, don't watch this video if this is, uninteresting to you and it's just not something you want to bother with. That's fine. If you do watch it, that was your decision to do that. All right. When Naludov knew Selinin as a student, he was a good son, a true friend, and for his years an educated man of the world with much tact, always elegant, handsome, and yet unusually truthful and honest. He learnt well without much exertion and with no pedantry, receiving gold medals for his essays. He considered the service of mankind not only in words but in acts to the aim of his young life. He saw no other way of being useful to humanity than by serving the state. Therefore, as soon as he had completed his studies, he systematically examined all the activities to which he might devote his life, and deciding that he could be most useful in the second department of the Chancellery, where the laws are drawn up, he entered that branch of the public service. But, in spite of the most scrupulous and exact discharge of the duties demanded of him, this service did not satisfy his desire to be useful, nor could he awaken in himself the consciousness that he was doing the right thing. This dissatisfaction was so much increased by friction with his very small-minded and vain superior that he left the Chancellery and entered the Senate. It was better there, but the same dissatisfaction still pursued him. He felt it to be very different from what he had expected and from what ought to be. While he was in the Senate, his relations obtained for him the post of Gentleman of the Bedchamber, and he had to go in a carriage dressed in an embroidered uniform and a white linen apron to thank all sorts of people for having placed him in the position of a lackey. However much he tried, he could find no reasonable explanation for the existence of this post, and felt, more even than in the Senate, that it was not the right thing. And yet he could not refuse it, for fear of offending those who felt sure they were giving him much satisfaction by this appointment, and because it flattered the lower part of his nature. It pleased him to see himself in a mirror dressed in his gold-embroidered uniform, and to accept the deference paid him by some people because of his position. Something of the same kind happened when he married. A very brilliant match from a worldly point of view was arranged for him, and he married chiefly because, by refusing, he would have hurt both the young lady who wished to be married to him and those who arranged the marriage, and also because a marriage with a nice young girl of noble birth flattered his vanity and gave him pleasure. But this marriage very soon proved to be even less the right thing than the government service and his position at court. After the birth of her first child, the wife decided to have no more and began leading that luxurious worldly life in which he now had to participate whether he liked it or not. She was not particularly good looking, was faithful to him, and seemed, in spite of all the efforts it cost her, to derive nothing but weariness from the life she led. Yet she perseveringly continued to lead it, though it was poisoning her husband's life. And all his efforts to alter this life were shattered as against a stone wall by her conviction, which all her friends and relations supported, that all was as it should be. The child, a little girl with bare legs and long golden curls, was a being perfectly foreign to him, chiefly because she was trained quite otherwise than he wished her to be. There sprung up between the husband and wife the usual misunderstandings, reluctance to understand each other, and then a silent warfare, hidden from outsiders and tempered by decorum. All this made his life at home a burden, and it became even less the right thing than his service and his post. But above all, it was his attitude towards religion which was not the right thing. Like every one of his set and his time, by the growth of his reason, he broke without the least effort the fetters of the religious superstitions in which he was brought up, and was not even aware of the exact time when he gained his freedom. Being earnest and upright, he did not, during his youth and intimacy with Nolodov as a student, conceal his rejection of the state religion. But as years went on and he rose in the service, and especially at the time of the conservative reaction in society, his spiritual freedom stood in his way. Apart from family pressure, especially when his father died and memorial services were held for him, and besides his mother's wish, partly backed by public opinion, that he should fast and prepare for communion, the government service required that he should be present at all sorts of services, consecrations, thanksgivings, and the like. Hardly a day passed without some outward religious form having to be observed. With reference to these services, he had to do one of two things: either pretend belief in something he did not believe in, and being truthful, he could not do that, or, having made up his mind that all these external forms are false, so to alter his life that he should not be obliged to be present at such ceremonials. But to do what seemed so simple would have cost a great deal. Besides encountering the perpetual hostility of all those who were near to him, he would have to give up his whole position, throw up the service, and sacrifice all the usefulness which he thought he was now rendering to humanity by that service, and which he hoped to increase in the future. To make such a sacrifice, one would have to be firmly convinced of being right. And he was firmly convinced he was right, as no educated man of our time can help being convinced, who knows a little history and knows how the religions, and especially church Christianity, originated. He could not but know that he was right in not acknowledging the truth of the church teaching. But under the stress of his daily life, he, a truthful man, allowed a small falsehood to creep in. He said that in order to do justice to an unreasonable thing, one had to study the unreasonable thing. It was a small falsehood, but it sunk him into the big falsehood in which he was now engulfed. Before putting to himself the question whether the orthodoxy in which he was born and bred contained the truth, that same orthodoxy which everyone expected him to accept, and without which he could not continue his activity so useful to man, he had already decided the answer. And so, to clear up the question, he did not read Voltaire, Schopenhauer, Herbert Spencer, or Comte, but he read the philosophical works of Hegel and the religious works of Vinet and Homyakoff, and he naturally found in them what he was looking for, something like peace of mind and a vindication of that religious teaching in which he had been educated, which his reason had long ceased to accept, but without which his whole life was filled with unpleasantness that could all be removed by accepting the teaching. And so he adopted all the usual sophisms which go to prove that a single human intellect cannot know the truth, that the truth is only revealed to an association of men and can only be known by revelation, which revelation is kept by the church, etc. And from that time forth, without being conscious of the lie, he managed, with a quiet mind, to be present at prayers and masses for the dead, to confess, make signs of the cross in front of icons, and to continue in the service, which gave him the feeling of being useful and afforded him some relief from his joyless family life. Although he believed thus, he felt with his entire being that this religion of his, more than all else, was not the right thing. And that is why his eyes always looked sad. And seeing Neludoff, whom he had known before all these lies had taken root within him, reminded him of what he had been. And especially after he had hurried to hint at his present religious views, he felt more strongly than ever that all this was not the right thing, and he became painfully sad. Neludoff felt this also after the first joy of meeting his old friend had passed. And so, though they promised each other to meet, they did not take any steps toward an interview and did not again see each other during Neludoff's stay in Petersburg. Thank you for listening to that. And remember to pray for the people inside your head, for they won't be there when you're dead.